Broadcast, but for now we carry on with the newspaper review. Many thanks indeed for staying with us right here on Citizen TV. You are watching the Power Breakfast Show. Keep talking to us. Your feedback on the state of the nation. Jubilee Party attempting to push through bills to amend election laws, a move which has been opposed by the National Super Alliance. What is your take? Have you had a chance to scrutinize some of these laws, and what do you think about them? Talk to us. 22422 is our SMS line. Use the hashtag Power Breakfast on social media at Citizen TV Kenya, and I will be reading your feedback throughout the course of this broadcast. Now we have some of those laws that we wanted to show to you at this time. We should be displaying them on your screen any minute now, and then I will give each of my guests a chance to do so, including Senator Samson Cherargei from Nandi County, who's now joined us, and I'll be giving him a chance to respond to some of these laws in just a bit. But let's take a look at them coming up on your screen shortly. There we go. Some of these targeted laws. Section 14.2 deletes a section forbidding incumbent government from advertising its achievements during the campaign period. And Section 2 delegates IEBC chairman responsibilities to the vice chair or a delegated commissioner in the absence of the chair or the vice chair. Some of the other proposed amendments. Qualification for the appointment of the chairperson of the commission drops the requirement that the IEBC chairman must be a lawyer. Some of the other changes requires IEBC decisions to be a majority of commissioners, but reduces the quorum to 3, which we had talked about a bit earlier on in the broadcast. Amendment of Section 39, determination declaration of results, makes it mandatory to transmit presidential election results electronically and manually, but manual results now are weightier, so to speak. Complementary mechanism for identification of voters relaxes the requirement for IEBC to provide for a complementary voter identification mechanism. Some of the others is non-compliance with the law, forbids judges from annulling elections over failure to adhere to procedures that do not affect actual voting. And failure or refusal to sign results prescribes at least 5-year jail terms for returning and presiding officers who fail to sign election forms. So that's just a little bit about some of the laws, the process beginning yesterday in Parliament, and of course it's now gone to public participation over the next 11 days or so. You as the public will get a chance to give your views about those laws. Let me allow Senator Cherargei now to talk a bit about those laws, and I'll give you a chance to do so. Welcome to the program first and foremost, and of course your take on these laws. Many feeling that when you pass a law, imagine it, and this is for you, Senator, imagine it in the hands of your worst enemy. Do you think the Jubilee Party has taken this into consideration even as they propose these amendments?
Thank you, Maiga, for having me today in the morning. First, I want to say the role, after being sworn in as both the senators and members of Parliament, our role began in accordance with Article 96 of the Constitution, and therefore any time the laws can be amended or repealed at any given time. Number 2, I want to say the laws, the Elections Amendment Bill of 2017 comes in hand to fortify and ensure the electoral process in this country works for the betterment of us. And I think when you look at the Supreme Court judgment, which relied heavily on Maina Kiai case, some of these issues that the bill tries to address are some of the critical issues that were raised in the judgment that needs now to be fortified. And I think one of the issues that we had was the issue of transmission, the issue of opening of servers, the issue of logarithms and what have you. But now what we're having at the moment now is that we are having the manual and electronic. Therefore, if electronic fails, always manual will proceed, and some of these things have backup in everything that we do, and therefore I support. And also the issue of now that there were so many issues that were raised that some of the forms were not signed, some of them were not done in due diligence by the ROs and POs. So I think in this instance, when we now prescribe a jail term, it means the POs and ROs will take their work seriously, including any officer that will participate in the electoral process. And I think when some of these issues come into place, we want to assist the IEBC to carry its work, and as Jubilee will ensure, when now the public participation goes as per Article 10 on the principles of good governance and national values, I think the public participation, and we expect the stakeholders, now that we are going for public participation and the select committees there, we would like to see the stakeholders, and as Jubilee we are willing to accommodate any amendments that appear reasonable and are reasonable indeed, to ensure that the amendments sanctify and protect the process. And finally, in accordance with Article 38, the Supreme Court was more concerned in the process of how the voting was done rather than the voter himself as provided and envisaged under Article 38. So those are some of the issues we want to protect and ensure the electoral process in Kenya grows and goes on. And I want to say that this is a legal process, not a political process. And therefore what we
even though the timing could not be, for some, even worse.
No, it's not worse, because these things, as a Senate and as the members of Parliament, our calendar started running. So there is no appropriate time. The time is now, so that we fix some of these issues once and for all, so that we assist IEBC to do its work and ensure the presidential elections that are coming on 26 are done within a good environment that ensures the elections are delivered in a free, fair and credible process and transparent for every Kenyan.
Okay. The amendments are still part of the bills. They are not yet law, but already some of the implications have started coming out. For example, yesterday, you know that there was a breakdown in a meeting at the Bomas of Kenya between various stakeholders called by the IEBC. And I want to start with you, Joseph. Even as we try and figure out, so the purpose of yesterday's meeting was to chart a way forward in regards to the October 26th poll. The meeting at some point, in a sense, broke down. The NASA team left that meeting, meaning, of course, it will not be able to proceed moving forward. What is the way forward for the country now? Because the polls are coming up soon, and the IEBC has not been able to get the two teams to sit down and agree on a common agenda.
I think situate that in the context. Again, of course, we have to just keep going back to the election and what happened after.
Okay.
The Supreme Court indicted the IEBC. It did not indict law. It found, problems with IEBC. So therefore, it behoves all parties in this process to focus their attention on how do we help IEBC to cure the mischief within itself. The way forward, and IEBC had been told this by a number of stakeholders very publicly, but they were very what's the term? They were very they just didn't want to listen.
Reluctant.
They didn't want to listen at all, or at least they appeared not to be wanting to listen. In terms of, look, there are problems within the institution, systemic and others caused by deliberate human errors. Let us come together and fix them, but they didn't want to listen. Well, it's good that now they say, let's talk. The way forward for me is that the stakeholders, and particularly the competing political camps, Jubilee and NASA, have to come together with IEBC and talk. Legislation, by the way, Mheshimiwa, is not a legal process. It's a political process, through and through political process.
How so?
It is political. Making of laws is not legal. Laws then create a legal environment, but the making of laws is a political process, because you negotiate interests. It's about articulating and negotiating interests. That is how MPs need to look at it and come into this, what is going on, as people who will enable the country to move to the next level. If they come in with goodwill, it's inevitable to have that feeling that we are competing, so therefore we must dig in and defeat the other side. That you have to give it to them anyhow, because it's political competition. But I beseech them that at every moment just to remember that at the end of the day we need to help Kenya to get out of this quagmire. It's good to have this kind of crisis because it forces people to think. It reminds young people who never experienced Moi that it's not always been the way they found it, that some things have to be fought for and so on. But at the end of the day, everyone in a leadership position has to help to ensure that there is genuine dialogue. There is discussions on how do we fix the mischief in IEBC, so that we ensure that it carries out a credible election. That is it, because if, again, for as long as a section of the population feels that the competition is not fair, we will not get out of the quagmire. And that is almost like we are digging in to guarantee that that is what happens next.
Okay.
Whereas we should be sitting back and saying, well, we are competing, but how do we get out of this to ensure that we have an election that everyone, as much as humanly possible, sees as having been a fair process?
Okay. Honorable, let me bring you into this, taking the discussion further. Joseph there stating that Jubilee, NASA, IEBC need to sit down and chart the way forward. IEBC Chairperson Wafula Chebukati stating yesterday that in the next meeting he would like to meet with President Uhuru Kenyatta, NASA leader Raila Odinga. In the current political environment that we are in, is that meeting probable? Is it possible? How soon can it happen, do you think?
Thank you so much. I think as a people we must forever remain optimistic as a nation. there are of course competing interests that would people with entrenched interests that would not want that kind of meeting to take place. But with the time limits that is in our disposition, it would only be fair that we do not send emissaries who still have to report back to us, go back and forth. So such a meeting is possible if only the interest groups, most of them just interested in the cookie jar, were to be put aside. But coming back to what my sister here and the senator said, it is important also to debunk the myth that the Jubilee Brigade has been banding along, that there was no issues with the numbers, that NASA got 6.5 million, they got over 8 million votes. Those are the numbers that Jubilee ascribed to us and which the court did not delve into because their origins could not be ascertained as to how they came from the polling stations and found themselves into the transmission system. And they refused to open the server. So when you talk about these elections, never say that the figures were never addressed, that the figures were never attacked. They were attacked. In fact, you cannot claim to get an answer when your formula is wrong. Number one. Number two, let it be known that dictators the world over do not wake up from their villages to become dictators. Neither are they born dictators. Dictators are made by men and women who surround, define and characterize them in their power games. More importantly, look at our history. When Idi Amin came into power, he had to use the judiciary and parliament to entrench his dictatorship. So we cannot just say that parliament has a right to make laws even when they make laws that go against the people. Amin not only
are you saying that we're headed to some sort of dictatorship rule?
Literally,
is that the example?
That is the story I'm building for you. Give me just a short while.
Okay.
What I'm looking at, when you look at Uganda, Amin went for, is the one who released Benedicto Kiwanuka from jail, made him a chief justice, wanted him to comply with his unruly decisions. When Benedicto Kiwanuka refused, he killed him, and the dictatorship started. When Moi wanted to convert Kenya into a one-party state, he did not go to his Turgen community. He came to Nairobi. He went to parliament. He changed law. And Uhuru's core base suffered for 24 years untold sufferings that this country, that are even unimaginable to this country. He did not just wake up and say, tomorrow I will lord it over you. But more importantly, I want you to look at it this way, that the Nazi Germany, so the Nazi Germany of Hitler, that gentleman relied on the law 100%, and even the people who were used to exterminate and commit genocide were saying they were complying with the law.
Honorable Law, some of our viewers watching would nevertheless ask themselves that you used to belong to the TNA party, which is now part of the Jubilee party.
Yes.
Did you not see those things then? And
excellent. And I'm coming to that.
Then?
That's a question I must answer.
Okay, briefly.
That's a question I must answer. So when the Nazi guys said that there was no law that barred them from exterminating the Jews, remember it was the law again being used. At the last time I was serving the National Alliance, I can tell you, and I've told you, dictators are not born dictators. Every mother has his little bundle of joy as a very innocent baby. Dictators are made by the men and women who surround the leadership. The man I served was not a dictator, but I can tell you the men now surrounding him, these changes were never brought at that time. You can now see we are at the convergence of making Kenya a dictatorship. And therefore, I was right to have jumped off that ship because it was headed to dictatorship.
Honorable Wangari,
as I finish,
okay, finish briefly.
Bwana Senator has told us here very clearly that the Supreme Court did not indict the law. In fact, they said that let the elections be done in 60 days in accordance with the law. So why is Jubilee panicking to change the law if it is not for purposes of entrenching dictatorship and securing a bogus win?
Fair enough. Honorable Wangari, coming now.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I'll just respond to a few of the issues. One is that, you know, when you talk about the Supreme Court ruling, that requirement that IEBC was told to carry out an election in strict conformity with the Constitution and the applicable election laws. That was very critical. Yes. Because what Supreme Court did, and why we had issues with it, is because it said there was a problem. But who did the issue? We were expecting when the final comprehensive ruling is out, they will say it was it was Chebukati who did wrong, it was Chiloba who did wrong, but they did not. So what we do, and as lawmakers, it is what do we address as the gaps that were exposed even in the ruling, because that is what happened. You said the processes, and that is why you're saying, the petitioners were saying, the system was hacked. There was an algorithm, there was a factor that was introduced to multiply the votes, and we are saying, let us help the NASA argument. In fact, we want to make it easier for you, that whenever you have
If
doubt...
you want to help the NASA argument, why do you think they are so against these amendments?
No, I'm saying, I want to explain to them why it is actually meant to help them, because when you say that a system has been hacked, and you cannot prove exactly that it has been hacked, let us help you. We tell you, 34A's are the results that are filled in the 34B in 290 constituencies. Can we tally that and do the mathematics and see who won the election? So that you don't have to really worry about the hacking, about Safaricom, about Augrea, and in terms of the collapse of talks in Bomas yesterday and the day before, because yesterday was not the first time these talks have collapsed. In fact, a few weeks ago, NASA had walked out of anniversary towers. They had even said they don't want the talks, and I remember the deputy president rushing for that meeting so that it happened. It never happened. And what we are seeing now is tantrums from NASA because they don't want anything. In fact, you look at their demands and they reduce our minimums. They have issues with everyone. They said it's KDF wants to rig. They started it's Chiloba. They now say it's Agurea. We have 5 farms. We want to procure from you. We even shortlisted them. If you listen to Raila, he said he even has people ready to supply the ballot papers. He wants to be the IBC chairman. He wants to actually do the procurement. He has issues with Safaricom, and yet he's still using it to fundraise. I mean, I think we need to be very honest in this discussion. It is in our interest, and if you listen to Chebukati, he's a man who has had to do so much in very tight schedules, because even when he took up, he had 7 months with new commissioners to do a credible election.
However,
if you look at the transmission,
these laws that your party is proposing complicate his job even more. And he's asked Jubilee Party not to. He's questioned the motive to some extent of these laws. And yet you say that you are trying to help him. No, if you listen to him, Wahiga, yesterday, he was very clear. In fact, he said, I have not read the laws. You cannot critique something you have not even seen. I think you cannot criminalize the fact that some laws have been tabled for first reading in Parliament and you have not even read it. And I would implore to him, we have these days up to 5th. If you have issues with the laws and think they will affect you as Chebukati, as a commissioner, as a chairman of a commission, can you submit those views? And I'm sure we have been magnanimous, even in the 11th Parliament, in terms of taking up views. And we have even had laws that have been taken to court and prosecuted and actually suspended by a court of law. In terms of going back to dictatorship, I want to tell all, I mean, it can't be further from the truth. It can't be further from the truth. The constitution of this country does not even have that window of sliding back to dictatorial tendencies. Let me bring in Senator Cherargei. I know you want to respond to what Honorable Olo had to say, but before that, I also want to ask you, because I believe our viewers are also asking, what is the way forward for the nation, bearing in mind the talks collapsed yesterday at the Bomas of Kenya? I can give you a chance now to give your views on what the way forward is, whether that meeting between Uhuru, Raila and IBC will take place as well, even as you respond to Honorable Olo. Go ahead, Senator Cherargei.
Thank you. I think anywhere negotiations normally collapse, so this is not the first time that we are seeing. And
it doesn't worry you?
It doesn't worry me because it's part of the negotiations. The parties normally they could have the issues they want to discuss, and one of the reasons that some of these negotiations failed is because there were some issues that the NASA brigade had with that the law had already been debated, and I think some of these issues we need to agree that under Article 1(2) of the Constitution, the sovereignty of people can be exercised by representatives, and we are represented. And it is very interesting that NASA are bashing the Jubilee Brigade because we have tyranny of numbers. It is a democratic country. We went for an election, we got the numbers, and we will use those numbers to ensure we better this country. And I want to challenge them that some of these issues, they are blaming Jubilee for going to Parliament to discuss the bill, yet themselves they were also intimidating IBC for going for demonstrations and mass action. It means and these reducible minimums and conditions that they are giving IBC is not based on anything. They just want to rely on bring IPPG agreement that was in 1997, and yet the constitution we have is a progressive constitution that we can build on the laws that we normally create. The issue of dictatorship, I think Onyango Law has been with us, with TNF for very long, and he knows who is a dictator. The dictator is his current master, Raila Odinga, because when he lost in 2007, in 1997, in 2007, in 2013, and now he has been fighting referee forever. How can you want to dictate? And the only free and fair, credible elections in this country, according to doctrine of Odingaism, is that when he wins. When he loses, that election is not credible. And we have insisted, and we want to be very categorical. The head issue with servers and electronic, but now we are telling them, let us use manual, so that if you don't trust electronic, the recounting of votes can be done. And I think some of these issues. Sorry for interrupting you. What would you say to those who feel that the amendments, the proposal for these amendments by the Jubilee Party is to counter NASA's irreducible minimums and potentially distract NASA, rather, I beg your pardon for that, from their push to reform the IEBC? In fact, we are assisting NASA.
That all that we are seeing is basically a political strategy. How would you respond?
We are assisting NASA by fortifying some of these demands, by ensuring that we ensure there is no what we call lacuna in law, so that when electoral process, we don't just behave like we are in wilderness, but we have a process where we can assist NASA with some of these reducible minimums, because if reducible minimums are just conditions, we are now putting in law so that it has weight, that when the electoral process is being carried on, it assists the IEBC to do its work, and we are just fortifying their conditions that they have brought in and ensure that the IEBC works within its mandate that has been provided by the Constitution. And finally, when you see, we should note, and I think there is this wrong notion, by the time, and I want to agree with my sister Mheshimiwa, by saying, by the time before even the judgment was read, NASA had 12 people that they wanted to sack, and they had technically profiled some of them, including Kasaiti, Praxidis, and Mohati. And when you look at those names, it comes from Atepila. So they had technically profiled. It means they were preview who was culpable before even the judgment was being made. And some of these laws we are putting in place is to caution and protect the independence of some of these institutions that are being created by the Constitution.
You say some of these laws, you're doing this to help NASA. Clearly, they're not grateful for your help. Let me bring in Joseph into this conversation now. When both sides of the political divide start calling each other dictators, Joseph, how do we find a way forward out of this situation?
I think it's for citizens to seize the moment. You know, they will continue doing this and arguing and grandstanding, but let this crisis provide an opportunity for citizens to seize the moment and to ensure that, you know, we have as many centers of power in this country as possible, so that you do not have one, you know, center of power lording it over the rest of society. Neither parliament, nor court, nor the executive, and so on. We need to have, out of this, to develop strong, particularly strong civil society institutions, people's institutions, so that they can arbitrate, they can help to arbitrate in future when we have a clash of interests in our society. I want to emphasize something, because again it's like a myth that keeps being repeated all the time in public. It is not the role of a Supreme Court to point out that this and this other person is the one that we are indicting, that therefore go for him or her. That is the responsibility of the investigatory agencies. Once a court of law has decided that a law was broken, it does not go ahead to specify that this individual and that individual are the ones responsible. It's the role of investigative agencies to follow that up. Therefore, the part of that amendment, which to me appears from a distance to target courts, the one that talks about what a court of law may not base its decision on, is like, you know, it's like actually telling judges how they should interpret the law. It's like interpreting for them how they should interpret the law, and that is their responsibility. I can actually see, even if some of these laws go through court, go through parliament. I can see them falling in courts of law. Because there's a boundary to which there's a line that you cannot cross when you are making law. You don't prescribe to courts of law how then they will interpret the law. But in terms of just generally moving forward, what I would tend to agree with the senator here is that let us not necessarily see the crisis as something negative. This is how societies develop. When there's a clash of ideas, when there are disagreements in values, let us have this confrontation so that out of this, the best of this nation can come out and flourish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph, for that. Let me read some of the feedback that you're sending us on 22422, or sending to us rather on 22422. Peter Kinungi from Embu: I support the Amendments to Elections Act because it was evident during Supreme Court ruling that it was not clear to them what the complementary system was. Secondly, I support specifically the complementary voter identification mechanism, as I did not vote since my name was missing in the IBC register, yet same IBC registered me and issued me a card. Dirk Lennart from Mombasa says, after 10 years in this country, I see politics taking an ugly turn again, so concerned about the laws there. Albert from Laikipia: Wahiga, kindly ask politicians across, and it's good some of them are here with us in studio, to be guided by the golden rule when they make laws, in order to avoid making draconian laws which will haunt them for posterity. And let me see here, Mary from Wajir: the proposed punishment for returning officers, the proposed punishment for ROs is good. ROs who fail to comply with regulations should be jailed for life before taking us back on the campaign trail. This is Mary from Wajir. And Ahawo Pangla Jacomenia says, election law changes are not necessary now. It may cause rifts among political parties and communities in Kenya. Honorable Law, let me come to you as well, even as we discuss that. I want to refer to something by the NASA CEO yesterday, Norman Magaya. He stated that the Jubilee Party will be shocked on October 26th, that it will be just another day on the Kenyan calendar. What does that mean, even as Kenyans, look forward to October 26th to vote and hopefully carry on with their lives?
I think literally let us not try to glean what is in another man's mind, because as they say, not even the devil can tell what is in another man's mind. But basically that the October 26th will be a day with 24 hours, just like any other day. But more importantly, as to go to issues that have been raised by my colleagues here, Jubilee seem to want to help everybody, except they are giving help that everybody does not want. They want to help Chebukati in a way that Chebukati has not asked for that help. They want to help NASA in a way that is different to what NASA has requested. Our position has always been clear. Let everyone know, number one, it is not Raila Odinga, neither is it NASA that nullified the elections. The elections were nullified by the Supreme Court of Kenya, whose Chief Justice and judges were constituted during the currency of the current regime, most of them. By the way, my challenge to them would be, tell me any 3 countries where presidential elections have been nullified by its own Supreme Court, and you'll find at most in modern history there could be 2 or so. That indicts you very heavily on what went wrong with our system. Secondly, the problem was never with the law. If you read the judgment of the Supreme Court properly, the problem was that someone got into the system and posted his own results. And the law as currently constituted can actually protect this thing, the election process. What our brothers are trying to do is take us to the manual system which we are running away from, which is prone to a lot of abuses. In fact, don't be surprised if they say, after securing the manual system, when they now come and say, why don't we go Mlolongo? After all, Mlolongo was a very popular system with the KANU supporters. So it is not fair for them to say that let us just have a system that if we are in doubt, we can go and count the ballot papers, that if people are in doubt, we go and open the ballot boxes. What if the ballot boxes have been stuffed by ballot papers? And that was something that characterized KANU regime and has characterized our politics until we said, let us run away from them. Please, do not engage in these diversionary tactics, my brothers and sisters, of saying that the problem was with the system. Let us face the problem head on. The problem was the thieving and stealing and constant gerrymandering with electoral system.
Honorable Olo, if I can just get some clarification from you, your key issue with these amendments, is it the content of the amendments, is it the timing, or is it both?
Both.
Both for you.
The contents do not serve us. The timing is definitely very wrong for us as a country.
Okay.
It does not inspire confidence at all.
Honorable Wangari, I can allow you to respond now.
Yeah, in fact, when I listened to Honorable Law, I remember yesterday we had a very heated argument in Parliament when we were debating the motion to reduce the time, and of course with the Select Committee. And one thing that the NASA people and NASA parliamentarians were raising is that the temperatures are very high, that it's not the right time because temperatures are high. Who has contributed into raising these temperatures? In fact, if there is anyone who should be held liable and held solely responsible for the temperatures, it is NASA Brigade, because they have been on the streets, they have even threatened to go back to the streets, and they have said they will do it until something happens. And their minimums is what we should listen to and nothing else. I think that is not the right way to go. I think we must give the parliamentary role also time to go on, because Parliament is running. We also have a mandate to deliver, and if there is any disagreement, let us do it on the floor of the House, and let us also do it in the public participation, because it's been provided for in the Constitution.
Before you go on to your next point, I want to say that looking at the SMSs that I'm receiving from viewers, Honorable Wangari,
yes,
it seems that a cross-section of viewers believe both sides of the political divide are both working to contribute to the tension that we experience in this country. How do you respond to that? Because you say it is the NASA side who are contributing to the tension. Some viewers feel it's also the Jubilee side as well.
In fact, you know, we've been very quiet. In terms of even the issues we had with IEBC, we have been very quiet, because when we see someone deliberately not signing a form or giving in a fake form, who is an official of IEBC from a stronghold of NASA, where if they're having more votes in Mombasa, it should be their business to actually get the form returned the right way and delivered the right way in terms of transmission. But you'll get a form, say in Kisauni, where we were not getting a majority of votes, was not signed. When we put the criminal nature and we criminalize that, because nullification of an election is not just about making history, Honorable Olo, that we want to be the third or the fourth in the world to nullify so that we become famous. It has very serious implications in terms of the lives of Kenyans. It has very serious implications in the terms of even our children, in terms of the generations to come. And to what Joseph was saying in terms of having centers of power, I think power has been so devolved in this constitution of 2010 that we don't even need to say we need to have many centers of power. They're already created by the constitution. Even that IEBC is a creation of Parliament. I mean, even the laws and the regulations they are using is also a creation of Parliament. So if you say the Supreme Court has no mandate and has no right to point out who did what and we leave it to the investigative agencies, then what does it say? Is NASA an investigative agency when they say we have 9 that we want out before we go to an election? Are they an investigative agency? And I think those are the questions we are asking. So you cannot criminalize the fact that we have some laws that we are debating on the floor of the House legally, in a diligent manner, in a way that we are avoiding anarchy and hooliganism on the street, in a way that we want to tell Kenyans that let us reason as grown-ups. I would say we should have, the ideal case should have been IEBC, do your work. But did they leave IEBC alone? Of course not. And again, let us not criminalize the issue of majority in Parliament. You love the majority in the Supreme Court. Don't have issues with majority in Parliament. It is double standards and it's hypocrisy.
Senator Cherargei, I can also allow you to come in. Honorable Law stating that for him he's not happy with the content of the amendments, neither with the timing. How would you respond to that?
Thank you. Let me tell my brother Joseph, in this bill, there is nowhere in this bill that they want to threaten the independence of judiciary, nor we want to give the compass or the direction on the decisions that the judiciary will make in any decision, be it presidential petition. Number 2, the timing or the content is appropriate. I have insisted from when we started this discussion that the timing and the content is appropriate, because as the Senate and as the members of Parliament, our calendar has started running. And some of these reducible minimums, I want to request Onyango Olo and his brigade that we have been given 11 days for public participation. Those reducible minimums, they can still be factored, and we have said in the select committee we form with they should give us their members, so that as we go through public participation, if they have an issue that needs to be fortified through the law, they can now get time and present some of them. And if their amendments are reasonable and they want to assist to sanctify the electoral process in this country, then we will agree with them.
What would reasonable look like?
Reasonable is reasonable is that they should not be part of what we saw them sabotaging, as Mheshimiwa said, because allegedly out of 5,000 forms that did not have watermark, most of the constituencies that NASA legal team relied in the submissions in the presidential petition came from the NASA strongholds. It meant that they were part of the sabotaging, with the end game that they ensure that sabotage the electoral process in the area, so that it can give them the fodder or the ground for them to lay down a petition that will allow them to nullify, the Supreme Court to nullify the presidential petition. And therefore, when you look at all these issues that they are being raising, we should not just discuss on a pen and paper. We should put it in the law so that we don't have a crisis where in 2022, when of course they are perennial losers, they will also bring reducible minimums and held the country in hostage and in crisis the way they are doing. Because if they want to do the right way, they should come to the floor of the House. And I've seen, and it's good, is the Speaker of the County Assembly, and he normally encourages the MCS to come and contribute. Why are NASA boycotting? If they have an issue, let them go to the National Assembly and present the issue. If they have an issue, they should come to Senate and highlight some of those key issues so that we can talk to each other, not talk about each other. So if the problem now, the only place you can get their issues and reasonable minimums is maybe they are in press conferences or in some hotels. We have never seen them where legislation is being made to allow them some of these issues to be discussed.
Senator, I want to take you back to something you mentioned briefly before I come to you, Joseph. You stated that the laws within the bill do not touch on the independence of the Supreme Court. Yet we know, and maybe you can help me, look deeper into that bill. Is there anything regarding what needs to be done to invalidate an election? Isn't that something that the Supreme Court would need, if another petition comes, when the Supreme Court goes back to the law, they'll realize that the law has changed as compared to what they had before. Wouldn't you say that in a sense limits?
I think what we are looking at
the workings of the Supreme Court. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think what they may be discussing in Section 83 of Elections Act, where they remove R and added R. Because if you look at the decisions by the Supreme Court, they didn't look at both in qualitative and in quantitative application of Section 83. And therefore we are assisting them so that they look both quantitative and qualitative in the decision of the presidential vote. And in fact, when you look at the Article 140, Article 140, I said when there is fresh election, we are trying to amend that when there is fresh elections, we don't need to do a fresh nominations of any presidential candidate. What we are just guiding them by assisting so that 60 days is a very short time for IEBC to prepare. So imagine if they have to go back for fresh nominations of presidential candidates, then submit those names, then start the process of ensuring we have presidential candidates. And I think some of those, there is no way the independence of judiciary is being threatened. The only way is to assist and guide them. But anyway, even the legislative arm has the opportunity to grow the law. Okay. Just the way the decisions of God are always try to grow the law.
Allow me to interrupt you there because we are pressed for time. I want to give each of you 1 minute, and I want to pose a question to you that was asked actually by an independent lawyer, Steve Ogola, yesterday on Opinion Court. He stated that Jubilee and NASA should be worried that in the midst of all this grandstanding, brinkmanship, whatever you call it, Kenyans may give up on them and chart an alternative political path. That was his closing statement yesterday in Opinion Court. I want to get your view on that. Even as you give your closing statements, I'll have to be very strict. 1 minute each, and I'll start with you, Joseph.
Yeah, and it's partly what I've just said, the need for citizens to seize the moment. Because the problem we have in the country is not just about an election of a president. That is belittling it and making it too limited. We have a much deeper problem, a much deeper political problem, which in my interpretation of historical facts began began much earlier, but was made worse from 2003, because 2002 we had thought that we had given ourselves a moment to begin to reform the country, but the person we put in at the helm took us right back. And that problem has persisted to date. And it's important that citizens seize that moment. And I want to beseech and advise our good senator and MP here, do not demonize the streets. Some of the best achievements in terms of governance reforms, in terms of political reforms in this country that we've had, have come from the streets, have come from forests, not from the floor of the parliament. In fact, many times when parliament has been retrogressive, we have achieved progress in the streets. And that opportunity is still there for citizens themselves to seize this moment and demonstrate that we are not even worried about an election of Uhuru Kenyatta or Raila Odinga or whoever else. We are worried about where you are taking our country. We had begun this process and you are taking us right back and entrenching, as Olo said earlier, signs of dictatorship.
Okay.
We must stop you in the tracks and continue with what was aborted by Mike Kibaki and his friends.
Thank you. I have to interrupt you. The Honorable Law, closing statement.
Thank you so much. Mine very briefly is to inform my brothers and our viewers that the judiciary, even if they were to look at quantitative, they would only look at it once qualitative qualified. Secondly, more importantly, we have gone to the people because the majority in parliament is not only fraudulent, but it is a product of the computer, as stated by our leader earlier, and that these intentions, the intentions of these amendments are all calculated to muzzle the judiciary, to intimidate the judiciary and intimidate citizens. Finally, let it be known that we as the NASA fraternity are calling upon Kenyans that this is the time that patriotism calls upon them to stand up firm for what is right and not look back, and that the beginning of dictatorships were never started somewhere in the boardroom but sometimes in parliament. And when you have the rise of the cheering crowd as we have today in our parliament, it is a recipe for dictatorship that we must stand up against.
Okay, noted. Honorable Wangare, I'll give you 1 minute now also to respond as you give your closing statement.
Thank you, Wahiga, and I will just pick up from where Honorable Law has left it, and I say the quantitative and the qualitative must be concurrent. You cannot just assume to take the qualitative and ignore the quantitative. I think that one we must put out very clearly. And I would also speak to what Joseph has raised in terms of demonizing the streets. We don't demonize the streets. In fact, some of the leadership that you see even in Jubilee, even His Excellency the President himself, was a part of even that in the year 2005 with the banana and the orange. I mean, they have been there. So we don't demonize the streets. But as the President says, your rights also end where you trample on mine. Let it be peaceful. He has said it before, but you cannot bring hooliganism, destroying of businesses. You cannot bring criminal nature and criminal elements like what we are seeing in Kisumu the other day, terrorizing women who are just having a meeting because you have some frivolous accusations of, I don't know, you're selling IDs and you beat them up senseless. We saw the attacks and the burning of houses. I mean, that is not what we are looking forward to. And anyone goes that route, the criminal, it becomes criminal, and it should be dealt with it exactly that way.
Alleged Jubilee supporters were also blocking roads on major highways.
Yeah, that's the thing. If it gets criminal, Wahiga, if it gets criminal and you have beaten up someone, it is a criminal offense.
Across the political divide.
Regardless. And we must not sink this country to anarchy. The people who suffer most are women and children when these things happen. So I want to wind up on the issue of boycott of elections. And I think when you say you don't want to, in fact, someone asked me, if you are Raila Odinga and you add up your numbers and they don't add up, would you want elections? And I think that is exactly what Raila is taking us to. Suckers and circles. I think he should have learned from Wetangula and vie for a Senate seat so that in case this doesn't work, you can go back to parliament. In terms of boycott, anyone can. Please write a letter to IEBC, withdraw your candidature, and let us save the 9 billion we are doing in the supplementary budget and put it elsewhere.
Asante sana, Honorable Senator Cherargei.
Thank you. What I want to tell Kenyans, let them come in large numbers. We are going to have public participation. If you have reasonable amendments, as Jubilee, we are willing to accommodate. Secondly and finally, this is the historical moment that all of us as Kenyans, we must come up and ensure on 26th of October we exercise our rights. And to finally finish it, Kamal, I think NASA, the immediate president of that was killed in Egypt, when King Farouk was supposed to be removed and these conspirators want to kill, they say we'll not kill the king, we'll just exile him and allow the history to sentence him to death. And that is what will happen to Raila when history is being written in this country.
That's how we wrap up this broadcast. Thank you so much. Many thanks indeed for being here with us. Many thanks to my panelists also for taking time to be here with us, and to everyone who took time to write in to us, 22422, and on social media as well. So much more to talk about, and of course so many more SMSs that I cannot read at this time, but unfortunately time is not on our side, so we leave it at that for now.